So, guys and girls, welcome back for another interview. This time we have got the legend, you might have heard about him, but he doesn't do many interviews, Jordan Rolband. So Jordan has definitely caught the attention of a lot of people in my circles, in my network, in the mastermind, and so on and so on. And we just had to reach out to him to get an interview and actually to get him booked for our luxury mastermind that's coming up in January. So we reached out to Jordan. We had a bit of a back and forth, and he agreed to hang out with us, and he agreed to do this interview. So I'm super stoked. Jordan actually has done multiple $1 million days, right? That's $1 million in a 24-hour period, which is pretty nuts. I mean, I'm not just talking about the sales side. It's pretty nuts when you think about logistically how on earth you manage that. How many packages is that? How many people are involved in that, right? When you really delve into that, it is incredible. Way more incredible than the 7-figure starting point, which is also incredible, right? So we're going to delve into that in this interview. And without further ado, Jordan, how the hell are you, man?
Hey, man. Yeah, great. Everything's good. I'm, here in New York, enjoying another cold day here. But, it's part of what we do, part of the grind.
Part of the grind. Is that why you got the hat on? Is it a bit chilly?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess you haven't known me long enough, but I think the hat has basically become sort of like the staple of who I am within the industry.
It's your brand.
I've been wearing these types of hats probably for the last 20 years. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of my brand. Man,
you look fucking cool as well. So you are wearing that hat. You can wear a hat, but you're like wearing that hat. So good job. So Jordan, right, I'm super conscious of your time, and we're gonna make sure that there is value and more value in this interview. So we're going to crack straight into it. And I want to ask you, like, how did it all start? Like where did you come from? Like, how did you get started making money?
Yeah, I mean, well, I will say this. I mean, obviously now I'm, an online entrepreneur, right, in a pretty big organization. But if I think back, 20 years, I don't think I would have ever imagined that I would be doing this. I started off as a pretty young man working for, my dad was in the antique business. I was working for his business, just trying to make some extra money and occupy time between school and whatever else I was doing in my life. I think really it was about trying to make some money to impress girls. But
did it work?
It worked.
It was. Girls like money. Who knew, right?
Once I had enough money, it started to work, right? Before that, it was basically fake it till you make it. So,
okay. Sorry, continue. I just had to ask.
Yeah, so I was working in New York City, back 20 years ago when New York was a very different place than it is today. Basically waking up super early, right? Being out there at like 4 a.m. in the morning on a Saturday and Sunday, like ruining my weekend, and selling antiques. And at the time, like, it was kind of like pulling teeth, right? I hated it. It was like the worst thing. And my dad was like, really, like, I want you to get into this. I want you to learn about like prints and furniture. And I had no interest in anything that was related to antiques. But what I did find that I was highly interested in were watches. And I actually met a guy working at one of these flea markets who was selling, like mid to like high-end watches, going back again 20 years ago. I mean, so like the low end of it was like the Movados and the Tag Heuers, and then the high end was, antique Rolexes, and those types of watches, right? Like the old school APs, old military watches. And I found it fascinating. So I started to really follow him and what he was doing. And basically one morning I walked up to him and I was like, look, I don't know if you are looking to hire anyone, but if not, I'd like to basically become an apprentice to you and follow behind and essentially learn about watches and really learn how to sell them to people. Okay. And, he thought about it for the day and basically said, yeah, I'll take you on. I'm not going to pay you any money, but if you could sell these watches, I'll give you a percentage of them. So that's what I started to do. I was basically taking the watches. I was, 16, 17 years old. I was taking these watches, especially the low end watches, bringing them back home to my friends, and I started selling them to my friends, right? So they were, I'd sell a Movado or a Tag Heuer, maybe like one a week, and I'd make a nice little piece of that. Then it became 2 a week, then it was 10 a week. And then I realized, outside of the circle of my friends, where else could I sell these watches? So I started learning about selling online on eBay, and some of the other platforms that were available at that time, and essentially started taking these watches in bulk and basically flipping them. And it became a nice little business for me. I wound up doing it for about 4 or 5 years, but basically buying and selling these watches. I started going to different auction houses in New York. I was bidding on lots of watches, right? And basically utilizing the money that I was making from selling them to invest in more watches.
Yeah.
And it was a really nice business. It certainly wasn't something that was sustainable, and I had bigger aspirations. But as a young man, it was a great business to be involved in. I made a good amount of money. It helped put me through college. It helped, fund some of the other things I was doing. I bought my first car off selling these watches. Wow. And it was really fun. And I learned a lot about watches. So at this point in my life, I feel like I am certainly an expert in watches.
Nice. Are you wearing one?
I'm wearing an Apple Watch today.
Nice. Classic antique Apple Watch right there. So so you obviously learned a thing or two about selling watches and actually selling, I guess, particularly with the Rolexes, like you're into the high end. Were there any particular sales angles or strategies that you found that worked quite well for you that you utilized?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what really worked was the hype around the watch, right? Like, it's really knowing your audience, right? So I knew, like, with my friends, for instance, right? With most of them, they were younger. Some of them had money, some of them didn't. But it was creating that need for having that watch. Like, oh man, like, here's this cool Movado. It's two-tone. Like, if you buy this watch, like, come on, we're gonna go out later. Like, the ladies are gonna be checking you out. Like, it may just help you get in there, right? And like, I think that worked really well for them. The people that I was dealing with in New York, at the flea market, I mean, they were a bit, more higher end. So there was a different sales approach with them, right? And it was really like having a conversation and then understanding who the audience was and really like mimicking what they wanted, right? So like I knew that if I had a guy who was in his, mid 30s, he had already been fairly successful and was looking for a watch because he wanted accreditation from, whether it was his colleagues or from women or from his friends, that the best direction to go was probably with a Rolex or one of the more well-known brands. Yeah. Now, if it was someone that came along that had a high-level understanding of watches and movements, also was into antiques and arts, I would take a very different approach because I knew that they weren't going to be interested in buying a Rolex, right? So maybe I would talk to them about like a Jaeger LeCoultre or something that not all of us know about, but that would be more interesting to someone like that because it's more of a timepiece that you tell the story around. And that's really where I focus my attention is telling the stories around the timepiece to the individuals based on their personality.
And so delving into that, how did you, aside from your friends group, the people that you already knew, how did you go about very early on figuring out who that person was and what made them tick? Like, how did you do that?
I'd say eBay taught me a lot because selling on eBay at a very, early stages. And this is when eBay was like just starting out.
When would this have been? Like 19 something?
1999, 1998.
Yeah.
So eBay was like a smaller company. And I think what I learned is that, from getting feedback from people, right? Like they'd be interested in a watch and they would send you a long message about the watch and they'd have all these different questions. I started to understand how to read the different type of interest levels based on the questions that they were asking. Okay. And, I think more so than my friends, because a lot of my friends that were buying the watches, they were buying them because they just wanted to like look cool and kind of fit in or for like the purpose of picking up girls or again, like their circle. Whereas the people that were buying the watches off eBay, I was getting a lot of people that were like collectors that were looking for a specific type of watch and had very detailed questions. So I had to learn again, like how to really answer those questions and essentially like diagnose the guts of the watch. So I could be able to give them detailed feedback. And that worked really well when I was dealing with people at like the antique flea markets, for instance, because this was a different type of buyer, right? They had different questions, they had different interests, and it really helped me like grow that into like a nice little business for myself.
Nice. So at some point, and you said earlier on, at some point, you wanted more, right? You wanted to grow. You've already had some success. You've bought a car from it. You've picked up thousands of ladies, and and now you're looking at the next thing. So where did you go so you're selling watches already? Like what came next? What did you graduate into?
So I was in college, and
what were you
I had
studying?
about a year left.
Sorry,
what's that?
What were you studying?
Psychology and sociology.
Nice. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, so I was in college, and I had a buddy of mine who basically he had been successful. He was a pretty young guy. He was very successful, and he had offered me an opportunity. We were both living in the New York, New Jersey area at the time, and he was like, "Hey, man, I'm going to move down to Miami. I'm starting this business, and I'd like you to come down and join me."
Yeah.
And I had always loved Miami from just traveling down there. I had spent some time there as a kid. So I basically, I told him, yeah, I would go.
Yeah.
And it just like that, it kind of happened. I sort of planned it out over the course of a few months, but I basically just decided that I was going to uproot my life and go for it.
Wow.
And I wound up moving down to Miami and finishing up school down there because I hadn't even finished college at the time. So I finished up school down there, and that was kind of part of our deal, that I would have the ability to finish school because I wanted my degree. And even though it doesn't apply to anything I'm doing today, I think it's just important to have it, right?
Yeah.
It's an experience.
Mm-hmm.
So basically uprooted my life, moved down to Miami, spent the first 2 years down there pretty much grinding it out. I didn't have the watch business anymore because, I just gave that up. It was very time consuming.
Giggity.
And was sort of just going through this business. It was, we were in the finance industry. It was also new to me, but I was good at it because I knew how to sell things, right? From my experience in selling these watches, I could essentially sell anything to anyone. So I picked it up very quickly. The business grew, and because I think timing, right? The market also just was ripe for it, right? So the business essentially within 2 years doubled. Over the course of 3 years, it had 5x, and we had a nice successful business.
So this was in the finance space.
Yeah.
Was this finance is a big space? Was this stocks and shares, or was this investments? Was this
Yeah, so we were doing mortgages. We were also doing some insurance. We were doing some other finance related things like planning, etc.
Yeah.
And what I quickly realized is that while the business was interesting because I was getting to meet all different types of people, I was more fascinated by marketing.
Yeah.
Right? The marketing that goes into it, whether it was, writing out the pitches or the sales scripts, or buying the data, because at that time, a lot of what was done in terms of finding new prospects was through data. So you weren't actually using Google, or Facebook didn't even exist, right? So for targeting your potential consumer, you actually had to buy data, and you were loading a lot of that data into what was a dialing system that you would then do either voice broadcasts to, or just basically using a team of people to do cold calling, etc. And I was really interested in that data. But then I was also interested in figuring out ways that I could take the business and transition it onto the internet, right?
Yeah.
And using platforms like Google. So I got really good at buying on Google for different related, financial instruments, right? So for mortgages, for anything related to debt consolidation or debt settlement, for anything related to insurance, whether it was auto insurance or life insurance. And I got really good at doing this. And essentially what I realized is that I didn't necessarily want to be part of this finance company, but I wanted to get into marketing. And for me, it was this was the natural way to do it because it was what I was good at doing.
Yeah.
So I wound up packing up my things in Florida. I was kind of homesick. I was also dating a girl at the time who today is my wife.
Nice.
And she basically gave me an ultimatum and said look, if we're going to ever move this relationship forward, it's not going to be within this long distance relationship. You need to come back up, to New Jersey, or we should just end the relationship. And, she's my wife today. So, I knew she was the one for me. So I basically decided to pack up and move back up north. And I opened up, a company to essentially service all of these different financial related needs on the lead gen side. It was a small company. I had a few employees that were working for me, and essentially we went after different verticals, starting in the ones that we were good at, like mortgage and debt, and then really started to focus on insurance and buying across a multitude of different platforms, right? So we started with Google. Facebook had opened up their ad buying platform. We were one of the first people testing their platform.
Nice.
We got very good at buying and dealing with Facebook. And then I discovered affiliate marketing. And I think that's what totally changed the game for me as a person, for us as a company, because I realized that as a small team, there was only but so much we could do. But if we were able to leverage our third-party relationships with affiliates who are also essentially doing the same thing we were, but on a CPA, so we didn't necessarily have to always take on all of the risk of buying the media, that we could, 5, 10, 20x our business very quickly.
Yeah.
So I studied affiliate marketing. I got, I got very familiar with like all the ins and outs, and basically launched a multitude of different product offerings, finance related offerings, to a number of different direct affiliates and networks. And literally the business 20x'd in the matter of like 6 months.
Wow.
Right? Like we went from generating 300 or 400 leads a day to doing thousands of leads a day.
Wow.
And we took a very small business with a small team, and without having to add any more people or take on any more risk, we're really able to exponentially grow it. And it was pretty awesome.
So now affiliate marketing, and I do have some experience. We used to run lead gen for life insurance companies and a few other financial services as well. And actually we had like a lead generation company, and then we had a affiliate company, and
okay.
Of course, like affiliate marketing, the traditional affiliate marketing with the affiliate networks and so on, really that was like version 1, right, of influencer marketing. Okay,
absolutely.
It was using the original influencers, and so this is super relevant. And I really want to ask you, with your affiliate marketing, because obviously you're coming from as a product owner. You were reaching out to affiliates to say, hey, my product's good, I'm gonna pay you. My name's Jordan. Like, what was your method? How did you make your product stand out, and how did you convince the influencers, which is what they were, to work with you rather than all of the other options they had?
Well, again, if we go back to the origin story, like at heart, I'm a sales guy. So naturally, I was able to get on the phone or just set up meetings with people in person, whether it was through conferences, or sometimes on different like forums, and essentially sell them on the concept that like we were the right partner to work with. And, obviously like some of them would say like, well, I don't really know you guys, so yeah, maybe I'll take a pass. But the reality is that, well, I think 2 things helped. 1, the ability to sell them. 2, the fact that we were also buying and selling our own traffic. We were able to speak to the numbers, right?
Yeah.
So I could tell them, here's your expected CTR, here's your expected EPC, here's the targeting information. And because we were able to provide a lot of the information, it made things a lot easier.
Yeah.
Second thing was, with many of the relationships, we also utilized like affiliate networks at the time, right? And I'd known a few people that were working for different networks. So utilizing their relationships and their business essentially to plug into the affiliates was also a strategy that especially in the very early stages that we used to help fuel growth.
Nice.
And I think between the combination of utilizing the networks and the affiliates and then our internal buying, it really helped to grow the business, as mentioned, like very, very quickly.
So would it be fair to say that you were, rather than reaching out to the affiliates like in the masses, you were snipering. You were finding the ones you really wanted to work with and putting a lot of effort into, building a relationship, speaking with them, and ultimately making them feel comfortable enough to run your product.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we basically focused on all of the big ones, right? Like we knew where all the big affiliates were running because we also ran traffic. You essentially are watching what your competitors are doing. So we basically had a list of 10 or 15 different affiliates, 5 different networks, and we said, here are the players that are driving significant volume, that aren't afraid to spend, that are buying on some of the same sites that we're buying off of, right? Whether it was like utilizing Facebook or the MSN or AOL. Let's focus all of our attention to build those relationships as opposed to just taking on thousands and thousands of affiliates. Because I think when you do that, well, a lot of things can go wrong, right? Like you just bring on too many people And as a very small team with, limited technology, it becomes almost impossible to then keep control of compliance and tracking. And when you're dealing with like finance related companies, well, you have to be really careful about a lot of that stuff, right? So we sort of like handpicked our partners, based on, a certain set of criterias.
Nice. So you formed this company, you got the girl, you formed the company, you then 5x the company, 5x plus the company by leveraging affiliate marketing. And then what happened? Why aren't you retired in a castle?
Yeah, I mean, the business grew. The team didn't grow. So we were still a small team. And to be quite honest, like, I think as a lot of people say, like, I was making good money, but it wasn't satisfying me.
Yeah.
Right. Like, it was just money. It was like, okay, I'm making some money right now. Like, great. I'll be successful. But like, what's really the next step? Like, what does the evolution process look like? Right. And there are some people that in life, all they want is to be able to make a certain amount of money, and they want to buy a house, and they want like the wife and the kids and the white picket fence and the nice car. That's not me, right? It was never me. So I think I was really eager to build something bigger.
Yeah.
And, I think in doing so, I realized that with the team I had, and I'm still friendly with those guys, we just were never going to get to that point because we had a different vision. So basically the company was sold back in 2011. Okay. I spent a few years sort of figuring out what my next move was going to be. I was actually, working for a company for a few years, which was really interesting because up until that point, I had never actually worked for anyone. But I knew that in order to take the next step in my career and what I wanted to do, I had to learn a few things that you're not taught in school, or that I didn't learn along the way because I didn't have a group of mentors or people around me teaching me or advising me, right? Yeah. Like, I didn't grow up with tons of money, so it wasn't something that like just naturally came to me. Like, I had to figure it out. So I took a job. My real goal was to be there for a year, to be quite honest, and basically learn about the business and then essentially go out on my own and replicate it.
Yeah.
I got a little comfortable there because one, I was making good money. Two, I realized that like, wow, there's a lot more to learn in terms of like, if you want to build something bigger than what I really initially anticipated. Yeah. So I spent some time really thinking about it. And, then I also realized that if I want to build something, I probably need a partner, because the level in which I was thinking at this point was like, yeah, I don't want 10 or 20 or 50. I want to build a company of 1,000+ people. In order to do that, you need, at least in my opinion, right? Like, you need someone else that potentially can partner in with you. So you're not having to take on all of those challenges yourself.
For sure. So what kind of company was this that you were learning from and absorbing?
Yeah, so I was working for like basically an affiliate network / agency. They were, in New York, great company, met some really great people there. I was there for about 2.5 years, mostly focused on sales, but towards the end, like focusing on sort of bigger picture things as well. Okay. And then I met my business partner while I was working there. Yeah. And we were actually introduced through a mutual friend, and the goal really in the very early stages with him and I was basically that like he had been a marketer offline for many years and successful at a multitude of different things. Super smart guy. My background was in online. He was very eager to get into the online space in a really big way. Mm-hmm. And the initial plan was basically that I would just work with him, sort of like consulting and helping him build the business. I think what we quickly learned from just spending time together is that it would be more effective for us to build a business together as opposed to just doing this kind of like, I'll help you out, and then, sort of like you'll go about your business and I'll stay here or figure something else out. Yeah. And, it became apparent that like we could build something big together between my background, his background. He had spent a lot of time in Asia, so he had teams of people in Asia. We were talking about like what we would need in terms of like the foundation to build the company on. and the infrastructure, which I think has been critical to our growth. I had really thought about like what I wanted the sales teams to look like, and sort of like the vision over the next few years in terms of like how we would evolve the business from potentially starting off as kind of like an affiliate business, but really turning into, what I saw as being like our own end-to-end solution, where we're not only driving traffic or helping others grow their business, but we're also essentially like an operator ourselves of a multitude of different like products or businesses.
For sure. And so we're getting closer now to the present day with the businesses. Is that the same business that you've got, and what your brand is one of the products of that business, or did you then pivot again?
Well, yeah, I mean, so we built the company about 6 years ago, and when we started the business, it was really an affiliate network, like a boutique network, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's where we started. Yeah. We had about 10 people in the company, so we were pretty small. We were excellent at buying and selling traffic and leveraging, our relationships within the industry to really like help grow our partners' businesses. But I think what we also realized pretty early on is that, there isn't really like a long tail future in that type of business, and I know other network owners, and I know guys that have built these businesses, and I think, some of them have been highly successful, but I think where many of them have failed is they've really failed to pivot that business because you get very complacent, right? And in a business where you're very reliant upon third parties for everything, you can really only go but so far. So behind the scenes, what we were really doing is, and I joke around to everyone, like the money that we were making, instead of like spending it on buying, Lambos and flying private and doing all this stuff, we basically were just reinvesting everything back into the business. Every single dollar was just going back into the business, and we were building technology. We were laying down foundation and infrastructure. And essentially we had created this plan where, we said, we'll build technology, and that technology at some point will help fuel like the next stage of growth. And then beyond that, we're going to start developing our own products. And then beyond that, we'll control all of our own media. And then beyond that, we'll control the fulfillment side of the business. So we want to open our own fulfillment centers. And then beyond that, we want to control the whole customer journey. So we also want to open up all of our own call centers. So we essentially do everything for ourselves. So we don't have to rely on any third parties for any part of our business. And this way, if one of our partners fail, we are never impacted.
Absolutely.
And we slowly started to do that, right? So we went from affiliate network to essentially, running one or two of our own products. Then it became 3 of our own products. Then it became, let's really focus on these products and driving traffic to them globally, right? So like we started taking down different countries. So first it was the US, then it was the English speaking markets, then it became all of Europe, then it became all of, or at least a portion of Asia, right? Because you can't really sell these products online in all of Asia. Mm-hmm. Then it became focusing our attention on Latin America. And we basically built out like a global sales process for ourselves.
Wow. And so this is a physical product, right?
A multitude of different products.
Multitude. And what was your approach in terms of when you were moving into new territories? Did you do a lot differently, or was it actually quite similar? Was it different? Like, was there translation involved? Was there different angles? Was there different what's the subtleties there with moving into new areas like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to like explain a lot of this in a short conversation. Yeah. But basically, going back to what I was mentioning about like, the foundation in which we built, the business around, like we had also decided very early on that we weren't going to work with, with any like consultants or third parties in terms of like for translation. So we just started hiring people that we thought would be a great fit for us depending on the markets in which we wanted to go into. And obviously, like we did a ton of research on those markets, and we really looked at the data, right? And that data basically told us like, here's why we should be selling in this market. Here are the benefits of the market. So let's really focus our attention there.
Nice.
So having people in-house to do the translation work for us, we became experts at international banking, right? So I essentially could talk to you at a pretty high level about any type of payment method in the world because we've used it. Initially, we probably failed at using it, but over time, you become very good because you make all these mistakes. So now we know about, each particular country's payment methods, right? Mm-hmm. So I know that, like, if I want to sell a product in Brazil and, my strategy is to just use Visa and MasterCard, for instance, mm-hmm. I'm not in the game. Yeah. Like, I might as well just wrap the business up and try to go and move somewhere else because I'm not competing. So we learned about Boleto. We learned about installment payments and how to use installment payments and what like the sweet spot is for an installment payments and essentially how to manage the banking process there. And then we started looking at that same process across a multitude of different countries, right? Mexico has their own system. Germany has their own system. The Netherlands has their own system. So it was really about learning those different systems because if you don't understand the banking, right, like you could build wonderful pages and you can have amazing load times and a great marketing angle. But if you can't get the transaction through because your banking isn't robust, then like you did everything for naught. You wasted your time with all this fabulous marketing. So, we started to learn about all these different processes.
So do you have different pages, different landing pages for the different territories? So you've got like a Brazilian landing page which has a Brazilian
absolutely
charging in Brazilian currency and everything.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
So for Brazil, for instance, like we're charging in real, right? Like that's the currency that they use there. You don't want to confuse the customer there by trying to charge in USD. So we localize everything for the customer to provide the best possible experience. And that goes from the actual marketing assets to the checkout page, which involves obviously the banking. And then on the back end, the customer journey, right? Like from that first email that they get, basically welcoming them to us and essentially telling them that the product is on its way, to our remarketing assets, to the people within our call centers, whether it's inbound or outbound calling that we're doing. Everything is localized.
So you've got Portuguese-speaking customer service reps, Portuguese copywriters, Portuguese ad designers, Portuguese.
Absolutely. I mean, I could even take it a step further because we've made a big bet on Latin America, particularly in Brazil. We have an office in Sao Paulo. So we opened an office down there. We have a team, most of the office is developers and translators. But the reality is like, as we continue to grow our business dealings in Brazil and in Latin America, the office will also continue to grow because it'll help to service our needs. And I think in certain markets, you want to be boots on the ground, right? Like it's very hard to run a business in another country that's completely different than what you're used to if you're not there, right? It's easy to say like, oh, well, I'm going to build a business and sell into Brazil, but I know nothing about that marketplace. So it's one, I think, exploring the market, right, and actually going there and learning about the customs and the cultures of the people in which you're selling to. But then I think, too, is like if you want to make that big bet, then spend the money and create the infrastructure. Because if you don't, like you're trying to compete against the local marketers there, and they're going to kick your ass.
Yeah.
Like you can't compete with that. It's like, imagine someone like from Brazil coming into the U.S. and saying like, I'm going to dominate the U.S., but I don't know anything about it. Like, especially in the U.S. where we have some of the greatest marketing minds in the world, it wouldn't happen.
Yeah. Well, that's incredibly interesting. And so in terms of the space that you're in, now I appreciate, you might not want to reveal your brand or your product or whatever, but if you could give it a sort of generalized niche or as much as you're willing and comfortable to do, like what space are you in?
Yeah. So, I mean, today for the last, in terms of like e-commerce, right? Because I think at this point, like we've gone from network to a marketing agency to a technology company to really being just an e-commerce business, right? Like that's the way that I look at our business. And while, we build a lot of things and service, our internal needs, we also essentially can do this for clients, right? Like that's the reality of our business. We've basically built an end-to-end solution.
Yeah.
In terms of the products, we started, where we started was primarily with OEM products, right? Because that's sort of the easiest way to get foot in the door and learn about product and learn about packaging, learn about customers.
Yeah.
Today, what we've started to do and really like where our attention now is focused is obviously on building brands, right? And products that we can patent. And we have a team that essentially comes up with different concepts, and then we go through that whole process of doing the research, on a particular product, making sure that there's nothing similar that will create issues when we try to patent it, pulling off the proper patents, right? So design patents, utility patents, global patents, making sure that we're doing all the proper trademarking. And we have a team in-house, right, of a legal team in-house that essentially helps facilitate this for us. We also do a lot of the research ourselves. We have a head of product who is also essentially doing a lot of that like research and giving us feedback, so we know that we're moving in the right direction in terms of like the concepts of a particular product that we want to brand, and then obviously the marketing plan behind that. So I'd say today we probably have about 25 different SKUs. 15 of them are OEM products. 5 of them are products that now have patents that we're starting to sell, and then 5 are in production.
Amazing. All under this one brand.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so in terms of, so what I want to do is slowly pivot into some rapid fire questions. But right before I do that, I know lots of people in the audience would be wanting to know the answer to this question. At this point, roughly what sort of money daily are you spending on media, like media buying? Like roughly how much are you spending on media buying?
Yeah, I mean, that certainly varies. So if I looked at it, if I had to average it out, I'd say we're somewhere between, 400,000 and 600,000 a day.
Okay, and what would the percentage split of the different traffic sources kind of look like at the moment?
Also, like a really good question. I think it depends on the time of year. It depends on where we're finding. Right now, I want to give you like a real answer, not just like, oh, well, we buy on Facebook and this is why. There's so many different factors that play into like why we're buying off a certain platform. Like, last year we were having tons and tons of success on Facebook. This year, because of all the issues that Facebook has experienced, while we're still having success there, we've been utilizing Google in a big way. We're also pretty dialed in with the different native platforms, right? So whether it's like the Tabulas and the Outbrains, or actually just reaching out to direct site owners and working deals with them, because I think, we talk about gold, like there's gold there, right? Yeah. Because it's not part of everyone's strategy, because many people are just thinking like, oh, let me focus my attention on Instagram or Facebook because that's where everybody lives. That's where I can buy traffic. That's where the influencers are. But it's also that's where your competition is also playing. So our approach is like, we want to focus on those as well, but there's all these hidden gems that are just there for us, right? And particularly with site owners, that we've been able to really take advantage of, and that has been a really effective strategy for us as a company.
Wow. And so in terms of, I mean, that is gold right there. In terms of the dealings with the site owners, are you talking more buying banner ads on their site, or more buying like actual copy, like review, like maybe a review, or like actually something like an article or something?
Depends on the site. So sometimes it could be just about banner placements, right? And basically we work a deal with them, and we either pay them on a CPA, right? So they get a bounty or some type of rev share, or with some of the more complex sites, it's really working deals where, you're part of like their actual content, like your products are built into their content. I think both are very effective strategies. They're obviously completely different strategies, and that really just depends on the type of site that you're going after. We essentially focus on some of the biggest sites, right? And like we still have partnerships with companies like Yahoo and MSN, but then then a lot of the smaller sites too, where we see like high benefit, low competition, particularly in other countries, because remember, we're selling around the world. So, we find that like in certain countries, there's no one that we have to compete against on some of these sites. So our CPAs or the rev share deals that we work are very favorable to us.
Amazing. And so, right, let me start the transition here. All right, so what I want to do now is I want to delve into a little bit more about sort of the decision making, the approach to things. you've told a fascinating story so far, and I can see that transition, and you can just see how it's gone from the selling to the selling to the affiliate stuff to the into the ecom. I'm skipping a few steps, I know, and but you can see like how well that's transitioned, how each stage has fed the next stage. And at this stage, I don't really know if that's an accident or if that was just kind of your journey and you were just following kind of your passions. But in terms of your first 30 minutes of your day, right? And I'm talking, you've woken up, that's when the clock starts. In terms of your first 30 minutes of the day, what does that look like?
Usually, a workout. So I work out. I've been working out my whole life. So typically I start my day with a workout. If for whatever reason I can't, then I end my day with a workout. Mm-hmm. As mentioned, I have kids. So actually, I'll take a step back. Depending on what time it is, and I usually wake up pretty early, right?
What time
I'm
do you
usually
wake
up
up?
at like about 5 a.m.
Yeah.
So I'm up pretty early every day. So typically I grab a workout. My kids usually aren't up yet, but, I'll give them the kiss. Talk to them while they're sleeping, just like, hey, have a good day.
Yeah.
And then basically get dressed. I live in New Jersey, so I've got a pretty long commute into the city. So I take a bus into the city from where I live. It's about an hour ride in. I spend that hour either answering emails or listening to podcasts, just depending on my mood. And then basically once I'm in the office, which is usually somewhere around 7:30 to 7:45, mm-hmm. I'm pretty much like ready to go. A lot of the emails that I have are cleared out, and I can start like focusing and planning my day.
Nice. And do you have any kind of mindfulness practices or anything like that?
You know what? I don't, because I think, where I get my like mindfulness is in my workouts, right? Yeah. Like to me, that's a great way to start my day. For instance, like this morning, I didn't make it to the gym. And like when I walked in the office this morning, I definitely felt a bit off. Yeah. On the days that I make it in, I feel more relaxed. I have better energy levels. I feel amazing, right? And that's usually the way that I start. I also do the fasting. I've been doing the intermittent fasting for about a year now. Oh, wow. So I do the 16-8, which has been highly beneficial. And then I have a number of different things that I take, like natural herbs and supplements that I take, to really keep me going. So it's a mix of like different probiotics, herbal teas, ginsengs, turmeric. I use like coconut oil on my skin. Nice. And, I found like that over the years, in terms of just like, feeling good and being able to recover from working out, like these things have really helped me out. I also spend a lot of time traveling, right? And my travels mostly are outside of the U.S., so I'm taking long flights. Mm-hmm. So I drink a lot of water. I eat like pretty healthy, although around the holiday times I kind of allow myself to enjoy. Yeah. And that's sort of like my thing every year. I get like 10 days where it's just like, yeah, I'm going to eat whatever I want for the next 10 days. Yeah. But for most of the year, I'm eating healthy. I drink a lot of water. I don't take in high amounts of caffeine. Mm-hmm. I drink tea, but not like coffee or anything like that. Yeah. And then I have my like routine with the different like vitamins and herbals that I'm taking every day. And then the gym, like the gym is really, as mentioned, like the gym is sort of like my mindfulness activity, right? And absolutely. I spend 10 minutes stretching. And then my gym, the time in the gym usually consists of either like weights and cardio or boxing. I've been boxing for the last like 7 years. Nice. So depending on like how my day is going and how it's structured, like I'll do one or the other.
Wicked. And in terms of your herbs and supplement mix, is there any nootropics in that mix?
There isn't. No.
There isn't. Is it something that you're interested in, or do you have an opinion on, or? Again, for me, like I try to keep everything very natural. So, and what I do is instead of like buying pill forms, I usually buy powder forms and, do a lot of my own formulations. I learned from my partner and because he spent a lot of time in Asia. So he essentially has, went to herbalist years and years ago and basically had them build out a customized plan for him. Nice. So I think everybody's body is very different. Mm. So at this point, like I also now have custom formulations being built out, like based on my body chemistry, right? Nice. So I know that certain things will work better for me. And I think I've sort of found like that sweet spot in terms of like what I'm taking every day that will allow me to perform at a high level. And
I personally try not to deviate too much from that.
So you're pretty consistent in what you're putting in, because if you're consistent with what you put in, what comes out should be pretty consistent as well, right?
Exactly. Yes, it's very much true, and I can tell you that, like, I know during these days in December, like when I go on like my binge eating, that my body feels completely different.
Yeah.
Like completely different. Mm-hmm. Energy levels are lower. I feel like my brain capacity isn't as high. I can't think like as high level. Mm-hmm. And once I'm like back on my regiment, everything becomes like very clear again.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. So in terms of getting into a state of flow, right, do you have any kind of tricks or strategies or routines that you use to actually get yourself into a state of flow, other than, of course, the exercise and the herbals? Maybe we're talking music. Maybe you psych yourself up. Maybe you look in the mirror and go, Jordan, you're the man. You're the man. Have you got any kind of embarrassing, if you want, or unembarrassing ways of doing that?
For me, I'm very routine, right? Because I played sports in high school and college, so everything for me is about routine. So if the way that I really get myself into flow is consistency, like in consistency in meaning like, I did everything that I did yesterday today. Yeah. And as long as I do that, it's very easy for me to just like get into things. Yeah. If I'm slightly off, like for instance, I mentioned with the gym, like if I'm slightly off, even with the time in which I go to the gym, or the workout routine, like if I have to deviate from a certain routine that I normally would do on a certain day, it totally throws me off. Yeah. So really, like the best way to get me into flow is to keep me on a routine. And I can tell you that, like, again, having traveled a lot over the last 7-8 years, it's very hard to do that when you're traveling. So even for that, like I'm basically just like writing down like what I need to do. Okay, I'm going to land at this time. I need to be at the hotel by this time. I need to be in the gym at this time. I need to drink my tea at this time. Yeah. And as long as I do that, everything's great.
You can keep it going.
If not, I'm totally off.
Interesting.
And that like it sucks because like I don't have that, like as you said, like I don't have that method where I can look in the mirror and be like, "You're going to be the best today." Like
I didn't think for one second that was
up, like it doesn't work for me. Like it has to be the routine.
No, it sounds to me like what you're doing is you're minimizing decision fatigue, because you don't have to make these decisions because it's already an established routine. What about what you're wearing? Do you pretty much wear the same thing each day as well to like minimize that, or do you mix it up?
Well, I mean, yeah. No, I definitely mix it up, right, based on how I'm feeling. But everything is like I lay out everything the night before. So all I have to do is like get up in the morning, go through like my normal morning routine, put on the clothes that are already sitting out for me, and I'm off to work. Again, like when you travel, things are always a little different, and depending on where you're traveling to. But basically, like when I'm here, home, in the office, every day is like pretty smooth.
Boom. All right. So, what habit or opinion do you have that other people tend to disagree with?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's something that people disagree with, but I'd say what I try to avoid, right, is getting myself involved in conversations about religion or politics.
That's good.
So anytime a conversation comes up about either, I basically bow out.
I'm just going to scratch off the next 10 questions then. No, I'm kidding. Right, so that's fair enough, and I think that's a pretty good tactic there. I think those are two very hot button subjects, and to be honest, I don't particularly believe in either of them. So I'm going to move on to the next one. If you ran a school but you could only teach one non-traditional lesson, what would that be? Like if you had a school and there was a non-traditional lesson that you wanted to introduce into the curriculum, what would that be?
Don't follow what they teach you in traditional schools.
So it'd be like an anti-school lesson taught at school. Everything else is bullshit. This.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's definitely not all bullshit, but I mean, I can tell you that, and it's not just me saying it, right? I feel like so many people in life, especially for entrepreneurs, right? And I feel like the audience that we're speaking to today is probably chock full of entrepreneurs, right? Absolutely. So I think think differently. Like don't always, especially at a young age, right? Like don't always trust what someone is telling you just because they're supposed to be this, authority on it. Like, ask lots of questions, do your own research. Like a lot of things you have to figure out for yourself. So I don't know if it's necessarily about like an alternative way of teaching, but I think it's just figuring out like a methodology that works for you in a way that allows you to think outside the box.
I think that's a great answer. And actually, one of the things that frustrates me the most is when someone gives an answer and you say like, oh, why is it done this way? And pretty much their answer is, oh, because it's always been done like that. It's like, oh, okay, so you're still faxing stuff, right? You're still faxing stuff and going to libraries.
It's the biggest bullshit answer in the world.
I know, right?
It's kind of like someone saying like, that's impossible.
Yeah.
Like for entrepreneurs, like for every person that's been highly successful throughout the course of life, like these people have probably heard, yeah, that's impossible. You can't do that, right? But yet they figured out ways to do it. So I think you should never take anything at face value of being impossible.
Brilliant. What book or books had the biggest impact on your life?
Ray Dalio's Principles.
Nice. Why?
I mean, for a multitude of different reasons, right? I mean, I think just in terms of like, being in business, I think many of the different principles that he goes through apply to what essentially, we're doing here at DFO, what I'm trying to do, with the business. I think from a personal perspective, essentially also hits me the exact same way, right? Like I can look at his principles and say like, this totally applies to everything that's going on in my life right now.
Yeah.
And there's been some great books, but I think to date, that's probably been the best one that I've read. I've read it a number of different times now. I advise anyone that hasn't read the book that they should pick it up and read it.
It's right next to my bed, man. I've got a hard cover copy of it. All right, if I gave you $5,000 right now, what would you do to double it in 24 hours? How would you double it?
Invested in my business.
Yeah, just
straight up.
Yeah, just put it straight into ads.
I could sit here and say like, hey, yeah, I'd go play some craps in Las Vegas because I'm good at craps or blackjack or poker. But for me, what I'm really good at doing is building this business, and I believe in the business that we've built, and therefore I would invest in this business before anything else. Nice.
What's the best advice ever given to you?
Shit, that's a tough question.
I've got a few of them.
That's definitely a tough one. What's the advice? Shit. Can we pause out on that for a minute?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can change it to just be like, hey, what's some good advice you've heard lately? If that makes sense.
Hold on, because I thought about this when I actually saw that you had asked this, and it's a good question because there's so many different things that I think about like when asked that question. All right, I got it. Ready?
Go for it.
All right. So I think that the best advice that's ever been given to me is, always being true to myself, right? Or essentially always be true to yourself. And the way that I apply it is like always being true to myself. So, I think, spending a short period of time with me just chatting here, like you can see, I'm pretty direct. I speak what's on my mind. I try not to candy coat things for anybody. And I found that that's always, at least in my life, like that's always been how I've either built, successful, long-lasting relationships, whether in business or personally. The way in which the company has been built upon. The way in which I handle my business outside of work. That's really like what always has sat well with me.
I think that's great advice. Who gave you that advice? Do you remember?
I don't. I don't know if it's actually someone that actually like per se said it to me. Like. Yeah, probably my dad when I was like, 15 years old.
Yeah.
Was like, yeah, son, like you should always be true to yourself, because I feel like that's the way in which he always, went about handling his business. But I mean, I've definitely heard it throughout the course of my life a multitude of different times. And, you get lots of advice from people, but I think in the case of that, like that's something that's always really stuck with me.
Nice. I like that. How would you convince someone to do something good that they didn't want to do?
Damn.
I should have probably submitted these questions to you in advance, should I? So.
Well, like some of them I had and some of them I don't. So.
Oh yeah, this is a new one. I didn't realise that you'd already like done your homework, so I'm switching up to a different list. No, I'm kidding. I've got some classics coming up. There's like 2 more.
Something good they don't want to do. Shit, that's tough. I think there's there's so many different ways in which you can convince people. I mean, I think for me, right, it's really about sort of like showing, like basically just doing it myself. Like, here's something that I believe or that we agree is a really good thing. Maybe you don't necessarily want to do it, but I'm going to do it, and I'll show you why it's actually good.
Nice. So leading by example.
Yeah. So leading by example.
Nice. I like that. Now, would you rather fight 1 horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses? I love this question.
Well, okay, so that's something that I definitely can answer, right, because I know this. I know exactly what I would do. For me, because I've been into combat sports for a number of years, I want that one-on-one.
Yeah.
Right. Whether it's a bigger or a smaller enemy, I want the one-on-one because it allows me to be very calculated in which in ways in which I want to actually go about like breaking this particular opponent down.
Nice.
I love that.
So that horse-sized duck it's a horse-sized duck. So it's waddling, right? So it's walking like a duck. It's coming. It's a little bit unsteady on its feet, and you're sizing it up. You're figuring out its weak points, and you only have to do it once to take that down.
Oh yeah.
I like it. So what makes you the happiest, or what makes you happy?
Well, first and foremost, family. Right, like that is what makes me happy. Family, like everything that I do in my life, especially at this point, and I can tell you that as a person who, if I go back 10 years, I never thought that I would ever even be married or have kids. Mm-hmm. Being married and having kids has totally changed my life, and I think that no matter what else is going on around me, my family is what will always make me happiest. I'd say outside of that, is building this company.
Yeah.
The people, my business partner, the partners within the company, all of the staff that works for the company, whether it's someone that's been with us since day one or someone that was hired this morning. I look at this business as a family. Yeah. And, I'm happy when the business is obviously performing at a high level. When it's not, obviously, the idea is to figure out like what we can do to improve things. I'd say that working, with the group of people, especially like for my team here in New York, because this is the office that I spend the most time in. I enjoy the days that like we're just in an office locked in the room together, basically just doing collaboration, like in deep thought together, coming up with like new concepts and ideas that are going to help grow the company.
Actually, I've got a follow-up question on that, because what you're describing there is a very creative process. Would you describe yourself as a creative person naturally, or is there something that you do in order to get that creativity and the creative juices flowing?
Well, again, as mentioned, like for me, I've always been a salesperson naturally. So everything else in my life, I've had to work for, right? So I wouldn't say I have any high level technical skills, but I have an understanding of technology, right? Mm-hmm. But I had to like learn that. It just didn't like flow naturally for me. And I think the same thing with being creative. Yeah. At this point in my life, I've become creative, but I really had to spend time to get myself to that point, right? And it's obviously like reading books and studying arts, spending time studying people, studying methodologies. That's really helped me to become much more creative.
Amazing. So that more or less brings us to the end of this particular Ask Me Anything interview section. At this point, being the end, I realise I said that in a really sort of jumbled way, which might suggest there's like a part 2 that we're about to go into. No, it is the end. It is the end. But there's a very important last question, and that's, Do you have any asks or requests of the audience, which you rightly said is predominantly entrepreneurs looking to improve themselves, looking to whether it's to attract more wealth and they're at that stage, or whether it's they're looking to find their purpose, like you said, where they've got the wealth and actually they're looking to do something that's more fulfilling. Those are the kind of people tuned in and listening or watching this interview. Have you got any kind of asks or requests of those people?
Well, I'd say, in terms of like requests, I don't necessarily have requests from them, but what I would say is that, for me, one of the things that makes me happy is certainly being able to provide and give direction to others, right? Whether they are just starting out in business or they've been running a business for a number of different years and just want somebody else they can collaborate with or bounce ideas off of. I love being able to do that. I think there's huge benefit, from both sides, right? Like not only for me, but for them. So I think, if there's anybody that's listening and they have any questions, they want to talk about marketing, they want to talk about e-commerce, they want to talk about like building and structuring out a business, I'm certainly happy to take the time out to have that conversation with them. The best way in which to reach me is probably on Facebook. I still actually use Facebook. I like Facebook. I know a lot of young people are migrating off Facebook and using Instagram or other platforms, but I actually like Facebook. So you can find me on Facebook at Jordan Rolband. And feel free to message me. And again, we can have conversations about personal life, about business, really about anything. I love the collaboration, right?
Absolutely. And of course, if they want to collaborate with you in person, you're going to be in the Dominican Republic at the Palace that we've got at the end of January. What are you looking forward to most about that?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to to being around other entrepreneurs, right? And being able to, I think, help some of the entrepreneurs that are going to be there with potentially some of like what their issues could be and helping them solve those problems.
Absolutely.
Because that's, again, for me, that's what I love doing. Like having those high level conversations, where there's extreme value, right? Like you go to a conference, like a big conference, and sorry, I don't want to like ramble on, but like I've been to so many of these conferences over the years, right? And like you spend 3 days there, you spend a shit ton of money. Maybe you like as a company you have a booth or you're doing an event or this or that, and you come back and you're like, man, did I really get anything out of that? Because there's just so many things going on. Whereas like with what you guys have done with your mastermind, right? It's a smaller group, it's an intimate setting. Like there's just so much value that you can take away from that. And, I know for myself and for the others that are part of like the panels, these are guys that are like really into sharing and providing information to helping other entrepreneurs grow. And I'm super excited to be a part of that for that exact reason.
Absolutely, and that's why we put these on, right? And that's why we keep them intimate. That's why every single attendee is actually vetted. We'll know them, or we'll interview them, or we'll speak with them first, because we want to put a group of givers in a room, a group of value givers, sharers, a cool group where where everybody's like aligned and similar, and it's positive and creative and fulfilling, and that's. This is now our fourth event, and it's going to be the best one yet. We've leveled up, right? We've got a palace this time rather than just a shitty $50 million villa, right? We've got palace, right? It's got a helipad in the thing. We've got amazing attendees, amazing guest speakers, and you're going to be hanging out, right? You're going to be hanging out with everybody, participating in the sessions, giving value. What's your drink of choice? Do you drink?
I do.
You do?
I drink. So the company drink, right? The DFO special is an old fashioned.
Okay.
So that's our company drink. As far as my preference, it depends on the mood. I enjoy red wine, like Italians, and I also like bourbon. So I have a very nice collection of bourbon.
Nice. Well, we'll make sure that it's pretty well stocked then. For
but I'm definitely looking forward to getting together with the group and essentially being able to participate and give as much as I possibly can. From my perspective, like I love being able to do these things. And, while my time I feel like is always fairly limited, I think what I can give back to others, is quite valuable. And, I wish, like, from the bottom of my heart, I wish, like, at a younger age, like, I was part of some of these types of groups and had someone to give me some insight, because it probably would have saved me a shit ton of time.
Yeah.
As opposed to, like, having to go through all these different, like, life and business lessons on my own without having that guidance. And, I talk about this with friends, and even with my wife at times. I'm like, man, like, how much time I spent working on this fucking project that, like, just went, like, nowhere because I didn't have anyone giving me that proper guidance, right? So I think it's critical, like, especially in early stages, that you have people that have, like, been through that grind, that understand, like, what being an entrepreneur is all about and the pitfalls of being an entrepreneur. And that, like, it's great to have, like, all this nice stuff, and when you make money to spend it on all these things, but, like, how much work, especially for many of us, like, that actually goes into achieving that, like, level of success, when it's not handed to you, right? Because it's, like, easy if things have already been given to you, you have to take and build the business. But, like, if it's not, there's so much work that goes on to, like, just getting to each level. Like, you talk about levels, like, to the first level, to that second level, to, like, that third level, like, where you have enough where, you can like, buy a house and have a family and cars. And then, like, going beyond that, where you're not just making money, but you're building generational wealth, right? And I sort of look at that as like what we're doing here as a company. Like, this company is being built where, sure, if someone wants to come along in the future and buy us, maybe for the right number, it's for sale. But the reality is, like, it could also be a business where, like, my kids are working here in 20 years, right? And I think that's really the way we're looking at it. Like, this is a company that could be here for generations.
Absolutely.
Like, we want to build an icon, not just, like, another business.
Amazing. Well, Jordan, this has been fantastic, amazing, valuable to the max. I had no doubts that it wouldn't be, but you've delivered the goods. You've shared some absolute gems. And I'm truly grateful for your time and your attention. I look forward to hanging out with you in January. And hey, maybe we'll do a round 2 sometime.
All right, yeah, man. Likewise. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Sound good.